This is Shawn Parker, and welcome to the podcast. Today we have a really, really interesting guest, which is designed to make you smarter. For the time that you're going to invest with us, we want you to have a lot more knowledge than you did when we started out. Christian Palich was the president of Ohio Coal. Then when Trump was elected on his first term, he went in to work with the EPA in the administration. 2 years with the EPA, 2 years with the Department of the Interior. So if anybody knows and understands the questions of energy as it relates to the state of Ohio, the questions of energy as it relates to the future of Ohio, the future of our country, Christian is the guy. This is going to be worth your time to listen, worth your time to pay attention. So Christian, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you here with us.
Yeah, great to be here, Shawn. Looking forward to talking these important issues with you today. And it's a conversation that I think the country's excited to have, and I'm excited to be here to talk about it.
Good. So, starting off with, the big question out here, energy dependency, the future of America. I always want to start with that big glowing question in the middle of the room. Do we have enough energy for the future of the United States on the trajectory that we're in right now? And will our kids have jobs that will be able to produce incomes for them if we continue doing what we're doing, or do we need to change course?
So first off, on the energy side, on the demand, we have plenty of energy in this country. The question is, do we have politicians that are willing to make the smart choices to unlock that American energy, right? So in this country, at the current rate we're mining coal, we have over 500 years left of reserves, which is a long time. And in my opinion, Shawn, and I think maybe your listeners will agree with this, it's going to be time to figure out another energy source in 500 years. But right now, we have the most affordable, reliable energy with coal, other baseload fossil fuels like natural gas and oil and nuclear as well. We have an energy mix in this country that with smart decisions, we can have the most affordable grid anywhere in the country. It's a national security issue. It's an economic issue. What's the number one basis of life, right, Shawn, is energy, right? Like there's no such thing as a low energy rich country, right? All countries that have developed, mostly the Western world and Europe, here in America, Canada, it's because we've used our God-given natural resources like coal. The problem is we have short-sighted politicians that have made bad energy decisions, right? And went off and went into, I don't even call them renewables, Shawn, I call them unreliables, because these are things that when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, these aren't energy sources that can power a modern Western economy, which coal and other forms can. So we definitely need to make better decisions. I'm very obviously excited about November 5th election results. We elected a lot of pro-energy candidates, starting at the top with President Trump and Vice President-elect Vance, our own Ohioan, who's a big supporter of the coal industry. We have a Republican Senate with Bernie Moreno, who's went to a coal mine with Senator Moreno, and he's a huge supporter of American energy. We're really excited, but we have to make smart decisions, and we do, to your point, have all of those things in this country to make sure that our energy stays affordable and reliable, but we have to make decisions that, quite frankly, aren't like Europe and the EU that goes against our own interests a lot.
Absolutely. So, you talk about the politics of this, which, people are just really, really intrigued about that. Trump's first 100 days, what's going to happen?
Yeah, so I think the first 100 days, what you're going to see, number one, we're going to get confirmed our pro-energy cabinet. So the three cabinet officials, those of us in the coal industry are really looking at, is going to be EPA, number one, right? Like that's Administrator Zeldin, just absolutely terrific guy, was in Congress. He gets these issues. The Secretary of the Interior and our energy czar, Governor Doug Burgum, comes from a coal, natural gas-rich state like North Dakota. He's going to be an important guy to really get us back on track with energy dominance, as the president said. And then also the Department of Energy, right? Chris Wright, who is CEO of a natural gas company. No one knows better about the fossil fuel wars than Chris. So I think that's going to be a really important thing, is getting those folks confirmed. As we turn to reconciliation as an industry, as a country, what we're going to be looking at is on the interior side. My company mines federal coal. So we mine about 32 million tons in the state of Wyoming, federal coal, which means we have to get permits from the federal government, the Bureau of Land Management, pay a royalty fee. We're going to be working on right-sizing the federal program to make sense to our current economic status as an industry, number one. And number two, if we're going to have this resource for energy dominance, we need to make sure that it's economical to mine the coal. So that'll be the interior side. EPA, first 100 days, we're hoping a rescission of the Clean Power Plan, which would essentially kill all of our customers and kill many Ohio utilities that have affordable energy with burdensome regulations that aren't based in science that the Biden and Harris administration did last term, which honestly was just a continuation of what Obama did for 8 years too. I'm sure we'll get into that more.
Okay.
And on the DOE, and then on the DOE side, it's going to be pro-coal research, talking about what makes our grid secure and affordable and reliable. And we're hoping we can repurpose in those first 100 days a lot of the excess spending from the Inflation Reduction Act and bring that back into something that, quite frankly, helps with the president's mission of having baseload energy sources. So that's kind of what we're looking at in the first 100 days with a reconciliation bill, hopefully coming down the pike through Congress.
Let's talk about the environmental sustainability, the cleanliness of coal in its present state. That's the big thing that we have to fight against. As conservatives, we have to be well-versed in the conversation so we can talk to people and have good dialogue. We need to be smart. And that's one of the reasons you're here, is to make us smarter. We need to know what you know. In terms of Ohio coal production, what do we need to know so we can carry on good conversations with people that are going to say, hey, we don't like dirty coal, we don't like carbon footprint, all the buzzwords that are out there where that science is not necessarily proven, or maybe it is. You tell us.
So, number one, when I go to coal mines,
yep,
every single one of the miners is a hunter and a fisherman.
Okay.
That's number one. Number two, they live in the communities, and almost all of them have kids in those communities, and they've grown up in the communities. It's a very cultural, rich industry, right? So if I went and talked to all the coal miners here in Ohio, and I said, what do you think about the environment? They'd say, we love the environment. And that's why, number one, we want to mine coal the most clean way possible, which we do in this country with the most stringent regulations in the world in mining coal. I mean, you should see the permitting that we have to go through to mine. But number two, it's they live in those communities. Why would they ever want a dirty water that their own children are drinking, or their own kids in school and their friends are breathing the air out of there? So we have the most stringent regulations in the country, both on the mining side, the permitting. I mean, we have pages and pages of permits, which quite frankly is cumbersome and duplicative in most ways, but still it shows the things you have to go through to actually mine coal. And then turning to our customer side, we're on the production side, what our customers do, burning a coal-fired power plant. If you live next to a coal-fired power plant, you're going to be absolutely fine. Because here's the thing, is we have scrubbers and technology that have been developed throughout the years and years that make coal burn clean, very clean, almost as clean as natural gas in many cases in the most updated plants we have in this country.
Almost as clean as natural gas.
Yeah.
That's something that most people don't know.
Yeah.
And it needs to be said.
Yeah, no, which is great. It's not a knock on anybody. We're just saying that, many people talk about natural gas as a bridge fuel, the folks that want an energy transition. If you allowed us to have the most up-to-date, economical scrubbers and criteria pollutants, on these plants updates, we would be almost as clean as a new natural gas plant, which people seem to be more receptive to than a coal plant. I think that's a statistic many people want to hear, but I always point back to these miners live in these communities.
Yeah.
They would never, ever want to do anything. We're all great stewards of the environment, and as conservatives, we're conservationists, right? I love to hunt and fish myself. I would never want that.
We love our country.
We love our country. And there's nothing, one of my favorite things to do is to bring people that have never been to a coal mine and have them see what we do. You cannot tell the difference between the reclamation and where there's active mining many times because of the great backfilling and reclamation and seeding that we do for post-mine land use. So it's a misnomer. It's something the left and the radical environmental groups have used against us because you can find some bad pictures from way back in the past, but it's so much developed now, Shawn, that we're very proud of what we do, and none of us every day wake up wanting to hurt the environment. We're just really proud to be good stewards of the land that God gave us.
I think it's really interesting when you talk about coal being that clean and the abundance, but yet at the same time, coal's been under attack for, let's say, really probably about 24 years, with the exception of Trump coming in for his 4 years. Talk about production in terms of output in the state of Ohio. This is mainly, we're talking about Ohio, particularly because it's a coal state, ag state. How bad has Ohio been hit production-wise, job-wise, and the economic impact of all of that against the Buckeye State?
If there was a front line to Obama's war on coal starting in 2009, it really was starting in Ohio in a lot of ways, right? Like West Virginia, Kentucky, PA were hit hard. But when I became president of the Ohio Coal Association in 2013, we were mining probably almost 30 million tons of coal in the state, right? And which supplied tons of good jobs. We had about 3,800 direct coal mining jobs, which studies have shown for every one mining job, there's 5 subsidiary jobs, right? All the way from the diners in the communities to the subsidiary companies to, the Komatsus and Cats, right? That, have all these heavy duty equipment. So that's about 15,000 coal jobs, right? This year we'll probably mine between 3.5 to 4.5 million tons of coal in the state. So that shows since Barack Obama took the presidency in 2009 all the way to now, what's happened with coal production in the state. It's quite frankly really sad what we've seen. It was very short-sighted. And you can see energy prices, kind of correlating. As coal jobs went down, Shawn, you saw energy prices start to rise in the PJM market, which Ohio is one. So unfortunately, the war on coal hit Ohio hard, but we've fought back, stabilized the industry a lot. We still have some great mines here doing some great things and still employing a lot of people, especially in that eastern Ohio region.
Okay. Yeah, but I mean, there are communities that you drive to. I mean, I think of, Oak Hill down in southern Ohio, and they just don't have the vibrancy. The little leagues are gone because the economy is gone. And I think it kind of hits the soul of the community. I think a lot of those people that aren't working, that's where the opioid addiction came in, because they've lost their hope, they've lost their will, but they're still there. So if we can get this industry back on track, I look forward to a lot of really, really good things. In terms of energy poverty, that's a term that's floated around out there. Can you tell us a little bit about energy poverty and what that means to the industry?
So the one thing about the world is, you have all these countries that have developed modern economies in the West, right? Here in America and Europe, it's a luxury item to be able to say we want to stop, climate change, whatever that means, right? Like it used to be global cooling, then it was global warming. Now it's just climate change, which is a blanket term just, to talk about, because I don't know what their argument is alone. But
right.
The thing is, how arrogant is it for us to not want these developing nations with some of them, the world's most vulnerable populations, to not have access to something as much as a staple as electricity? In the world, what kills more people than anything, right, is the cold weather, right? In Europe alone, cold weather kills more people than extreme heat, and you can stop that. It's very easy if you have a heater brought on by electric from coal, and you've seen countries like Germany actually start to turn back. But energy poverty is a personal thing for me, Shawn. My wife was born and raised in Vietnam, a place where it's a very vulnerable population. They have, blackouts. My wife would tell stories about they knew that there'd be a week every month where they didn't have electric.
Look at Cuba.
Cuba.
Last month they had no electricity.
Absolutely. Sub-Saharan Africa. We should be exporting our energy to these places to help build these folks out of poverty and give them a modern economy, much like us. It is, to me, very sad, and I'm proud as a conservative to want to stand up for these populations, want to provide them the coal and the baseload resources to develop that economy for them so that they can flourish just like my kids here in Ohio do. But unfortunately, many on the radical left, the environmental groups, the folks that want to, throw black paint on the Mona Lisa, the Louvre, they're ironically sticking up for the globe. Well, they're not sticking up for the globe's residents as these people are. So, I think
the Greta Thunbergs of the world, right? Flying around on a private jet.
Yeah, it's a good life
to reduce the carbon footprint.
It's a good life if you can get it, right? But it's sad. And so I think energy poverty is something that hits very home for me. And I really hope that under President Trump and some very smart people in the cabinet, we can start sending our coal overseas to help, number one, keep good jobs here in America. And number two, by keeping those good jobs, the appetite for coal globally in China, Japan, South Korea, and Vietnam, where it's only growing, by the way. Vietnam is running their coal plants at absolute full capacity over the next 4 years. Their Environment Energy Administration just put out. There's a right market there if we can have the right policies. So
it's cheaper to produce in Vietnam, Malaysia than it is in China right now. So you're seeing a lot of shift in global industry to these other Asian countries that are up and coming, developing. Also, the fact that we have to reshore. China is no longer really a competitive market to produce in.
Yeah. Well, and if we care about the cleanliness of how we mine coal, wouldn't you want the coal mined here in America with our regulations, as we talked about, with those very strong environmental standards, rather than have China up production to export it overseas, or Indonesia, which is another huge export market that has less stringent environmental regulations? If you truly care about the global carbon emissions and the environment, you're going to want to raise those things here, or you're going to want to mine those things here in this country and raise production here.
Does China, how much capacity for coal does China have internally inside of their borders? I mean, my understanding is they're relatively an energy an energy desert, as that entire country is. But do they have a lot of untapped reserves? They do. I mean, they're building 8 coal plants a month, it seems like, at this rate. And it's because they have all they care about is getting it out of the ground and having energy so that they can have a growing economy, right? And, there's good and bad with that, but the problem is if they see an export market to make money, they're going to take that over, especially if we can't get our coal off the West Coast because of liberal politicians not letting coal and exporting climate change. Other countries are going to pick up their production, like I said, Indonesia and China, and that's only going to raise what they seek to stop, and that's environmental concerns. So do we have a threat for China to become a coal exporter then, to attack the price of coal? They could, clearly submarine, the price markets. They I was talking to some guys up in Michigan. They did it with the cherry market in Michigan, top cherry producing state, and guys are cutting down their cherry trees because they literally can't afford to compete with China on cherries.
Yeah, no,
interesting.
We totally see that as a threat. When I worked in the Trump administration at the Department of Interior, worked on critical minerals issues, right? Which is another subject, but just bringing it back to coal and mining in general. If we could develop critical minerals in this country, which is we've struggled with, especially under the Biden-Harris administration, because it's still mining, right? Mm-hmm. These minerals, China's just going to undercut the price, right? So if you have a critical minerals mine and it costs you want to sell it for $7 a ton, right? Like I'm just making up a number, then China's going to go, cool, we'll sell it for $6.50 a ton. Because they have a communist government, they don't have to worry about it. It can be subsidized.
They just say yes.
And if you take them to the WTO, the World Trade Organization, whatever tariff they slap on them is no problem because they're going to make enough money on the back end to pay that tariff anyway. And the WTO, for the most part, is not our friend. So it's sad.
So what about, we're talking global right now. In terms of national security, where is the United States with alternative energy that we're trying to introduce versus the national security question of, let's say we have, for whatever reason, 3 weeks of sub-zero temperatures across the north. Where are we with that? Coal's the answer, I believe. Yep. I think you believe that.
I do.
But can you articulate that a little bit for where that puts the United States?
We have a real-world example of this. Okay. What we saw with the ERCOT system in Texas during the winter storm 2 years ago, where we had loss of life event, where they actually were out of electric.
And in northern Ohio, the same.
That's
the same thing. People forget about the fact that we ran out of electricity in northern Ohio during that same spell.
Absolutely, and it's a great point, Shawn. And it's a human issue. Number one, loss of life event, but number two, it is a national security issue, which is why we're going to be talking to the incoming Trump administration about Defense Production Act capabilities of. Wouldn't it make sense to make sure the United States government has baseload power to power our Army facilities, all of our bases? Keeping the good thing with coal is you can keep up to 90 days or more on site, right? Even if the trains didn't come to deliver the coal or the barges, you could have that on site, produce energy, no problem, and keep the lights on.
Okay.
Not all energy sources have that, of course. Forget the unreliable sources of solar and wind. Nuclear is another one, but obviously there's not a ton of nuclear plants in the country now. They haven't permitted one in a long time.
Something we need to talk about as well.
Absolutely. That makes a ton of sense too. But coal, nuclear, natural gas is a great thing. They don't have as much storage on site. There can be pipeline issues, to be honest. We saw some national security with the Dominion pipeline hack. There's some national security issues.
Good point.
So as a coal industry, we believe we are the ticket to making sure that there is no national security issues in a major weather event by having coal on site, which is why our customers start to get real nervous, Shawn, when they see 15 to 20 days left on their stockpiles. They're like, get us some coal because they want to make sure they have it on site. Because nobody wants to be the ones that are responsible for a blackout where people die or there's a national security issue.
So I think it was the winter of 1978. We had a blizzard and the miners went on strike. Yeah. And we ran out of energy because we didn't have stockpiles produced in advance. We've moved into a supply chain of, we call it just in time. Our good friends at Walmart really were the ones that kind of put us into that manufacturing situation. We saw the downside of that during COVID, when we couldn't even get aspirin, we couldn't get surgical gowns for the physicians because we didn't have enough in reserve. What do we do? Are there things that we can do to make sure that there are plenty of stockpiles of coal for the plants that we still have open so that we know that we are not going to run into that problem, A. B, then what do we do about opening up more coal? Are we ready to do that in America so that we have the energy reserves ready to go? And we'll talk about that a little bit too.
Yeah, well, if you asked me, a month ago, I would have said we're not ready at all, because the Biden-Harris administration has been asleep at the wheel, ignoring this problem and appeasing their left-wing donors in Manhattan and San Francisco. I mean, it's just a fact. They were in the bed with the Sierra Club and the radical environmentalists.
Mm-hmm.
Now I see a new day. Now, the two-step process to what you just said, Shawn, is this. Number one, we should have a moratorium on shutting down baseload generation.
Okay.
The coal plants we have currently operating, whether it's in Ohio or across the globe, we should immediately stop shutting them down.
And the power companies would agree with that? This is politics from top down? I'm assuming the power companies would say, hey, keep our plants. We've already paid for them.
Yeah.
And let's keep running.
They will say that as long as the government's not doing top-down things to shut them down, like a Clean Power Plan 2.0 that I talked about a little bit earlier, or EPA regulations, or coal ash pond, which is a runoff of having a coal plant. Without those regulations making their plants uneconomical, not because of the actual market, but because the government's picking winners and losers, the utilities I think would agree with that. We've seen since the election. Side note: Duke came out and said that they're delaying retirements on several plants.
Okay.
Alliant Energy in Wisconsin just came out, who our companies proudly we sell coal to, said one of the plants it was supposed to shut down in 2026. They're pushing it back to 2029 now.
Okay.
So we've seen just the fact that President Trump's coming back change that, but we need to quit shutting down our baseload plants, number one, to essentially make sure that we have the power needed, because we don't want to be in power deficit when we have all these resources. That's just terrible public policy. So that's number one. Number two, if we want to mine more coal in this country, we need to update the federal coal program, which is something we don't deal with in Ohio because, we don't have Bureau of Land Management land here.
Mm-hmm.
Out west, almost the entire states are owned by the federal government, all the minerals in Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, Montana, those states. So we need to update that program. And then back east here, where we have some of the highest quality coal in the world, we need to have a permitting process that moves at the speed of business, not at the speed of government, and have people in there that really want to make sure that we provide the coal to these baseload plants that are staying open, and we have a market that matches the reality of the production needed.
Okay. Yeah, because that's one of the challenges. I read a statistic that when you go into an AI search, it takes 90% more energy when you hit the button to do the search than a traditional search, which means the amount of power demand that's coming at us is going to be infinitesimal. Yeah. Currently, we expect to turn on a light and we have power. If you want to bring a business and you want to open a factory, which we have to reshore, we don't have enough power right now to bring the reshore companies back to the United States. So we have to build, or as Trump says, drill, baby, drill, in order to be able to accommodate the future of this country. Coal, it sounds like, is something that we've got to get back to yesterday. We got to do it now.
Yeah. Well, if you want to develop AI and the data centers and all this future technology, all of it's energy rich.
Mm-hmm.
Electric vehicles, that's an energy rich thing, right? Like, I don't understand how folks think that you can run all of these modern things in the next generation of technologies without having energy. And it's just a fact. You can't have, recently there was a power plant in Minnesota, right, that announced they were going to close down. 500 megawatt coal plant.
Okay.
But they said, don't worry about it. We're going to have 500 megawatts of solar we're going to develop across the board.
How many acres of solar does that
And that's another
take
thing, what it does to prime farmland. That's, they talk about our, coal mines, whether it's underground or our surface pits. Talk about what windmills and solar panels do to prime farmland. I mean, that's a topic we could spend an hour alone.
Well, and that's one of the great resources of Ohio and the entire Midwest is the most robust, rich soil that grows anything that you put in there. You put a soybean seed down, it grows. Lettuce, it grows. We feed the United States. We feed much of the world. And when we take this cropland off, when you put solar farms off, one of the things I've read, the nickel and things leach out of these solar panels, and it pollutes the soil.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they don't have the same.
So why? Why are we doing this? What is it to feel good? It's
because carbon emissions have become the mantra of the left and what they want to get rid of. They've accepted the premise that carbon emissions are going to end the world. Although those predictions have seemed not to come true, thank God. They seem like they've been a little off on the predictions. But I think that's why they've done it, and it's quite frankly really sad. the permitting that you need for a wind farm or a solar farm is far less stringent than what we have to do at a coal mine. I can assure you that.
Okay, well, it's a lot less work, but the coal is a better product in the long run.
It's a guaranteed product,
and we're sitting on 500 years of coal,
that's correct,
which tells me that you can only measure it so far. So it's a resource that God gave us on this planet that, frankly, we're supposed to figure out.
And it's what drove the best economy in the world.
Yeah.
It helped us win 2 world wars. Without the coal to develop the munitions to defeat tyranny in Europe for those 2 world wars, we never would have had any of this. People forget. In my house, Shawn, I have a poster, and it's from the United States Fuel Administration. So prior to the DOE, and it says, help the boys in the trenches, mine more coal.
Like it.
I have it in my house because it shows, FDR was like, we need coal to develop munitions and power this country to defeat tyranny. And somehow we've got away from that. Hey,
it's how we beat them. The Germans were using lignite, which is a sludge.
Yeah.
And the Iranian oil fields is what they were trying to control. We beat them. We won that war on energy by taking their energy away from them. You'll see a lot of historians talk about it. They say the Second World War was won because the United States was able to cut off the Third Reich's energy supply. So it's pretty critical. I think that the big question is it's where do we go? How do we get there? Ohio, the Midwest, we are poised to become an industrial giant again, and we can be a clean industrial giant if we do it the right way. I don't think there's a way to do it without coal and nuclear being brought back online so that we can reduce the amount of predictable electricity to fire up these plants and to run our households and if we're going to do electric cars, which I think the jury's out on that one today, but whatever it is we're going to do, we need you to make it happen. So last thing I'll kind of get into, the will of the Trump administration. We talked about first 100 days. What do you see as the biggest impediments to making it successfully happen?
I think the impediments is, the Democrats aren't going to take some of this lying down. I think they worked very hard on things like the IRA, so they're going to be really protective of that bill and some of the things in there.
Okay.
I think you're going to have, we have a new energy and commerce chair, Brett Guthrie from Kentucky. It's a Kentucky, it's a coal state guy, so I think he's going to want to tackle a lot of these things. Subsidies is a big deal too, right? Like it's hard as a coal industry. We're getting subsidized by the federal government, which, tax write-offs. Our biggest one is we have a depleting resource. So percentage depletion tax write-off is something we get. So we get subsidized by the federal government. You could call it by about 73 cents, for every megawatt hour we produce, which is nothing. Comparable to the renewables, which it's 82 cents that solar subsidized or $82. Sorry, not cents, dollars.
We almost need to write this down. So coal gets
about 73 cents based on some of our tax write-offs we get, which is all businesses do.
All businesses do. That's
$82 per megawatt hour for solar, and it's about $18 for wind. So compare that; it's really hard to compete on a national scale.
So okay. The interesting thing here: coal is abundant. Coal is clean. Coal doesn't drain the taxpayers' pockets like wind and solar do.
Yeah.
What are we missing here? I just shake my head and wonder, how did we get here?
I don't think we're missing anything. I think there's a lot of Democrat.
You're not missing it. I'm not missing it.
A lot of Democrat politicians in Washington don't get it. But again, I take it back to where's their delegations from, right? Like you look at Congress and the makeup of what the House Democrats are, for example, or even the Senate Democrats for that, especially after this election. They're not from energy states.
No, places like Massachusetts.
Yes. We're just, they have, unicorn theories on energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these folks are all from the coasts. They don't, mostly wealthy. They don't mind paying, huge amounts for their energy, and they don't come from energy states, so they don't get it. Now, part of that's our own success in politics. We've beaten a lot of those blue dog Democrats that existed in West Virginia and Kentucky and here in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
We've beaten a lot of those folks. We don't have energy Democrats anymore. So they just don't understand it. So it's hard to get them to vote or see what the subsidies that they're looking at, what the problems are.
Okay. But the next time that the temperature drops below 10 degrees, and the gas plants can't run, the coal plants can run. Nuclear can run as well, which is a whole episode that we need to do, is to talk about nuclear at some point.
Absolutely.
Because I do think, going back to the Nixon administration, Nixon wanted to build, I think it was 360 nuclear plants in the 1972. So we would not be dependent on foreign energy. But here in the United States, in the state of Ohio, with fracking and good oil production, natural gas production, and more coal than you can shake a stick at, the future sits right here in the Midwest.
Yeah, and we just have to, energy is a tough thing, right? Like if you grow up in an area that doesn't have coal mines or natural gas wells or a nuclear plant, folks tend to think you just turn the light on. But it is such an important thing. I mean, look at what your household spending is every month. Like I just actually got my first energy bill, Ohio Edison bill here in Ohio today, on how much it is. And it's, these bills are expensive. I think about it as people, again, energy hurts the most vulnerable. In these communities across the country, we have to have affordable energy, not just for the big businesses, right? The Intels and the Microsofts and the data centers.
No, the regular people are impacted the most because they are the most. If we return to coal, what happens to the average person's electric bill? Let's say an electric bill is $200 a month, running the AC. Yep. Does it stay at $200 a month? Do you think we actually would see a decrease in the cost of what the average household, people with 3 kids, 2 kids, mom and pop struggling to make the bills, we can help them with that.
Absolutely. It's going to go down.
Okay.
It's just a fact because we know how to mine coal. We do it efficiently. We know what the price is per megawatt hour. I talked about, say we got rid of the subsidies, it would be priced even better per BTU, which, is the heat unit that, these plants run off of. Mm-hmm. I mean, we would immediately see energy prices go down. If we turned back to what our energy policy was more from the late 70s to the mid 90s. I mean, that is an absolute fact. Introducing these renewables, unreliables to our energy source has driven up prices. That's the fact. Shutting down coal plants like we have since Barack Obama was president has driven up energy prices. That's a fact that people can't argue. As a matter of fact, I don't even personally think that the Democrats would argue that point. I think they're only.
I don't think they would either.
I think that they're
proud of it.
They're fine with it too, Shawn, because they think they're saving the planet.
Yeah,
they can go fly to these COP28, COP27 meetings, climate meetings, and go, "Well, America's doing our part." But we're really not. Mm-hmm. But they want to claim they are, and President Trump's going to pull us out of the Paris Climate Agreement again, which is great because why would we put our economy in jeopardy when the rest of the world's not going to honor it either?
Yeah, that one never made sense to me. I mean, why we would be getting led by the Europeans on issues that the Europeans can't master themselves, never could, is really an acquiescence of American sovereignty, I think, in some respects. Those are big words.
John Kerry legacy issue is
John
what
Kerry
it was.
legacy issue.
That's what it was back
but
when
remember, he's the smartest guy that ever walked in American politics because he forgot about George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, all the guys I like. So
I'll tell you what, I would take any
and I'll put Ronald Reagan and I'll put Donald Trump on that list too.
Yeah. Any of our coal miners completely understand energy. It's a true story. They're the smartest people in the world. They run incredible equipment. They have to be incredibly safe. These are the smartest people in the world. Those folks would be way better to develop our country's energy policy than the John Kerrys and Gina McCarthy's of the world.
Here. Okay. Christian, anything else that we didn't cover that we need to jump on?
Last thing I want to leave you guys with, right. I really think is important. There's a narrative out there that coal's dead, right? Like if you follow the news or you look at energy, people say, well, coal's gone, it's dying, all that. We've had our struggles. Like I would never deny that. Barack Obama attacked us with a nuclear regulatory bomb back in 2009. But let's remember, 32% of the globe's electricity is still from coal. That's the globe. 26% comes from natural gas. So that's 58% of the globe's energy comes from fossil fuels, with coal still being the biggest. Our country needs to turn back to our industry.
No, and then there's oil too. Sorry to cut you off, but
you're right. So, that's about 22%. So now we're getting even closer to that 100% pie. Renewables is 8% if we're putting that in there.
8%.
8%.
So wow.
Yeah. So
and we're supposed to shift that quickly. Okay.
Yeah. So if we turn back to coal, Shawn, we are not dead. We still provide nearly a quarter of this country, United States, energy right now. If we have smart policies with smart politicians, like I think we have in office right now with the Republican trifecta in D.C., our industry is really excited for what the next 20 years could look like. So we are not dead. We're very proud of what we do. We want to work with our baseload partners because our goal in this country is to employ the world's best coal miners with the world's highest safety standards and the world's highest environmental standards, and make sure Americans can pay their electric bills and build a life that created this country. So that's the message I'd like to leave with.
Perfect. I love it. Thanks for coming and joining us, Christian Palich. Christian is absolutely a wealth of knowledge, and let's make sure that America is poised for the future, and coal is a big part of that. So thank you.
Make coal great again.